And I walked in one day on Tuesday, and there's Tony Joe.
Red, I don't know if you know the song "Rainy Night in Georgia," right? Brook Benton had the big hit with it.
Yeah.
Tony Joe White wrote that song.
Oh, okay.
His version of it is just fantastic. I love Tony Joe White.
He wrote if we're gonna go down this rabbit hole, it's gonna get deep. Saul, I love that you mentioned that. Tony Joe, I grew up listening to his records. He wrote Polk Salad Annie, and
that's the one he had the big hit with.
And
if that's all you know by him, you don't know Tony Joe White.
Yeah, and also Brook had the hit with Rainy Night, and then of course everybody covered it. My favorite version of that song, it's a tie actually between Tony Joe and David Ruffin. But Polk Salad was big, and Elvis was obsessed with Tony Joe. All the songwriters were obsessed with Tony Joe. Tony Joe was actually in L.A. when Greg and Dwayne went there, when they were teenagers. I think Greg was about 18 or 19. And Greg, early on when I was playing with him, when I joined his band in 2008, one day we were talking. And I think I asked him, I said, something about, how'd you get to writing your first song? And he said, well, I was writing for a while when I was a teenager, but when I met Tony Joe White, I said, well, that's interesting. He said, yeah, I took some songwriting lessons with him when I was a kid.
Wow.
In L.A., and he said that he really kind of shaped his whole view, and he was a massive fan, and we talked about him a lot. Fast forward to 2018, about a year after Greg died, I was in Leapers Fork, Tennessee, working with this band, Bishop Gunn, writing songs with them, and we were at the Old Country Boy, which is this amazing meat and three in Leapers Fork. It's right outside of Nashville. And I walked in one day on Tuesday, and there's Tony Joe. And I ended up having lunch with him on Taco Tuesday, which is something he started. And I mean, it was the most disgusting public high school taco you can imagine. He was completely, like the hard shell and like the beefaroni in a can or whatever. I don't know how they make that, but I was raised on it too. He loved it. And we talked, and we talked a little bit about Greg, and I told him, Greg had recently passed, and he was like, I'm sorry. Anyway. And then right after that experience, I went really back to the well, and I discovered an album I did not know growing up, because I knew all the stuff, the early records, but I did the first 3 or 4 solo albums, but I did not know this record that called Homemade Ice Cream. And it's produced by Tommy Dowd, who of course was the producer for the Allman Brothers. It's got a squad of Muscle Shoals guys on it, and it immediately became one of my favorite albums of all time. It is a profoundly great rock and roll record. Every song is perfectly written. He sings amazing. And then the other thing I discovered, this is about 3 or 4 years ago, was a live album he made called That On the Road Look. And it is just a knockout. Became one of my top 5 favorite live albums of all time when I checked it out. Donald Duck Dunn is on bass on it. And then there's 3 other cats, I can't remember their names, I'd never heard of them, but they're just burning. And he does, his hits, but then he has some other stuff. And then the third thing I discovered was Live at Austin City Limits, which is a whole nother look. That's it was done in 1980, and there's video of it on YouTube, but it's a power trio. It's just Tony on a Stratocaster, bass and drums, and these cats are just laying it down. It's like a whole alternate way to think of a power trio. It's like a song-driven power trio.
Is Tony Joe playing harmonica on that?
Yep, he's got it on the neck brace.
On the holder, and he plays it left to right instead of right to left. His high notes are on the left hand.
Yeah.
And there's just a sensibility of a J.J. Cale or a Tony Joe that after listening to Led Zeppelin and The Who and all that kind of stuff, it's just so refreshing.